The Georgian War was a high point and a turning point for the Kremlin. In its aftermath, relations between Russia and the West plunged to a new Cold War low. Even Russia's allies in Central Asia and China refrained from giving their support. The Kremlin looked increasingly isolated. And the war also begged the question of who really runs this country. Could Russia's new president, Dmitry Medvedev, just 3 months into his administration, really have made the decision to go to war? Or was it another man, a man who used to live behind these walls and now resides down the road in the Prime Minister's office? Vladimir Putin. It's a question that has dogged President Medvedev since the rainy night of his election back in March. As he swaggered across Red Square, basking in the glory of his landslide, there at his shoulder was Vladimir Putin. This was to be a new kind of presidency, a partnership. But who would be the senior partner? At his first press conference a few hours later, it was the question I put to him. Who will run Russia's foreign policy? Will it be the presidential office? Will it be the Prime Minister's office? And a second question, will the Prime Minister continue to have an office inside the Kremlin after you're inaugurated?
Это, наверное, самый простой вопрос из тех, что был задан сегодня. На него есть вполне конкретные, четкие ответы.
This question is really easy. Under the Constitution, foreign affairs falls under the remit of the President. And second, the President's office is in the Kremlin, the Prime Minister's office is in the White House, the House of Government.
Постоянным местом нахождения является Кремль.
But at their first meeting after the election, it was clearly still Mr. Putin giving the orders. When war broke out in Georgia, it was Mr. Putin, not Mr. Medvedev, who went to the front. In September, Russian television news showed a heroic Mr. Putin shooting and tagging a Siberian tiger. By autumn, people were openly predicting that Mr. Putin was preparing for an early comeback to the Kremlin. So was he? Mr. Putin, can you categorically rule out a return to the presidency in the next 12 months?
It's always the foreign media that are interested in this question. I have a very effective relationship with President Medvedev. I like the way we work together today. The next elections will be in 2012. Let's wait and see.
That, of course, only added to the speculation that Mr. Putin is now planning to come back and stay another 2 terms until 2024. By which time a 71-year-old Mr. Putin might look something like this. Those who oppose the Kremlin say that would mean many more years of this. People like former world chess champion Garry Kasparov, who knows firsthand what it means to take on Vladimir Putin.
What is the balance of power between these two? I don't care. Because what we hear, actually what we heard from the Medvedev speech, is a very simple but very strong message. We are staying, no matter what. That's the message. Whether it's for Putin, who is going to be back in a year from now, whether it's another intricate combination conceived in Kremlin's corridors, why should we be bothered?
But the biggest fallout from the Georgian war hasn't been political, it's been economic. In the aftermath of the war, foreign investors began fleeing Russia. In August alone, more than $20 billion left here. The result was that Russia's stock market went into freefall. In the next 3 months, it lost more than 70% of its value. Foreign investors were essentially punishing the Kremlin for its Georgian adventure. And then came the world financial crisis. Oil prices began to collapse, and Russia's economy began to look increasingly fragile. Beneath the surface glitter, Russia's economy is still very far from modern. This is the gate to the huge Gaz Auto Works, 500 kilometers east of Moscow. It still bears many of the hallmarks of Soviet central planning. Inside, they bolt together vans on an ancient production line. There's plenty here that Henry Ford would find familiar. What hope does a place like this have in today's Darwinian world of car making?
Yeah, no, good 25, we'll be fine.
If any, it comes from these men. These Canadian engineers are warming up hundreds of robots to make a new car here. A Russian car that the company says will be fit to compete in the 21st century. If this car looks vaguely familiar, that's because beneath the surface it's actually a Chrysler. This whole production line, this whole factory has been imported lock, stock and barrel from Detroit, Michigan. But this is a quantum leap forward for Russian car technology. Up to now, this factory has been making cars with technology from the 1950s and 60s. Now, suddenly, for the first time, Russia is going to be producing cars with technology from the 1990s. This project has been hailed by the Kremlin as a key example of Russia's economic diversification. But after 8 years of record oil revenues, this is one of just a handful of projects that have come to fruition. Analysts say most of Russia's economy is still languishing in the past.
The problem is that even though Russia has built up, the world's third largest financial reserves, it did not diversify the economy in any material way. The reason why Russia's equity market and asset prices have fallen much faster than everybody else, Russia's budget is dependent on more than 50% of its revenues from oil and gas, and more than 3/4 of the value of foreign trade comes from commodities. It has not diversified.
And because of that, Russia is now paying the price. This is Magnitogorsk, a massive Soviet-era iron and steel complex built in the 1930s on the orders of Joseph Stalin. In the last few years, this place has boomed on the back of record world steel prices. Everything about this place is absolutely immense. There are 8 of these enormous blast furnaces, and at full capacity, they can pump out more than 1 million tons of steel every month. And that's exactly what they have been doing up until last month, when suddenly the orders stopped coming. 100 meters away, another huge furnace stands cold and empty. Half the furnaces here have already been shut down. Officially, it's for maintenance. Unofficially, the mood here is now close to despair. In a tiny flat on the edge of Magnitogorsk, I've come to meet Taslima Sharapova. This photo is of her 24-year-old son, Ruslan. Last month, he came home from the plant desperate with worry. His salary had been cut in half. Depressed and in debt, he went to his bedroom and hanged himself.
Записку оставил: мама, я тебя очень люблю.
He left a note. It said, "Mother, I love you, but I'm deep in debt, so I'm taking all my problems away with me."
The bad news coming from here is starting to make the authorities very nervous. We've been trying all day to find someone who'll talk to us about what's going on here, but so far without success. One local journalist told us that he'd been called and warned that he'd be in big trouble if he meets with us. Now it appears we're being followed. Check out the Silver Larder, number 642. Here it is again, and again. Look at the man in the front seat. He's keeping a very close eye on us. Eventually we do manage to find one worker who's willing to talk, but not on camera. He says the plant management has ordered a total blackout on all bad news.
Сталин над людьми расправлялся. Жестокая была государственная политика, людей не жалели.
People say Stalin was cruel. Well, not much has changed since then. If you speak out against the management, very nasty things can happen.
At the end of 2008, as the economic crisis starts to bite hard here in its old industrial heartland, the future for Russia is looking a great deal more bleak and chilly.
For the latest highlights, bbcworldnews.com/programmes.